What's going on, running fans, jumping fans, athletics fans, all around track and field, whatever you do, fans? How's it going? Welcome to Talking in Ovals. I'm Alex Cuesta. Here always with me is my co-host, the man everyone comes to hear, Dave Hyatt. What's going on, brother?
Not much, just, getting everything back in order after the Christmas day with the family and, just getting life back on track.
If I turned my, you guys can see me on camera here. If I turn my camera around, my whole office is boxes because quite literally my kids are spoiled as all hell. But before we get into anything fun, today is Monday, December 26th of 2022. That's when we are recording. Give us a like, share, follow, subscribe, rate us 5 stars, spread us word of mouth, and go find us on the socials at Talking in Ovals. So we have a very fun guest today. Someone, Dave has been bombarding us with a lot of his good friends, which is fantastic because we've had a lot of fun. If anyone goes back and listens to last week's show, we had Scott Baker, head coach over at Southern Regional, who has been an absolute monster and a powerhouse over in the Shore Conference for the last 15 years. So he was a great guest to have on. This time around, though, we have someone who, anytime that we've actually had a PR, essentially, that we've been able to announce, he's actually helped out and given it to us because he's one of my good friends, one of my former coaches, a guy that I've looked as a brother now for the past, Jesus Christmas. It has to be, it's well over a decade now, which is ridiculous. But he is Chuck Williams. He's the head women's cross country and track and field coach over at Marist College. And he's now in his 23rd year of coaching there, which, Chuck, does it even feel like it's 2 decades plus right now?
It doesn't, but when then I start to look back at, some of the things we accomplished, when I was assistant coach and now as women's head coach, it's amazing how time has flown by these last 23 years.
And you absorbed a program from a pretty legendary coach from Marist College, Phil Knight, who had that program, did some special things there, had a lot of, really fast women, good field women as well, which is not something Marist is completely known for. But, you inherited it and you've taken it to the next level. And I think Phil would even agree with that you have taken it from where he brought it over to a next level, especially in our cross-country realm where we're a threat in the region every single time we step up in there. They know that Marist is coming to run. Before we get into all the coaching aspect stuff, we like to really delve in with our guests. And I feel like this has been something cool. And me and Dave didn't plan on this. This is organic, where we just kind of like to let our guests kind of talk about themselves in a running sense. And it was interesting because last week we had Scott Baker on, and Dave, I thought Scott was one of the most interesting because it's like, talk about when you had that spark. And he's like,
I surfed a lot.
I didn't. I surfed and a coach told me to do 400 hurdles and pole vault. And I did. And then I tried to do it in college. Someone told me how hard it was going to be. And I was in North Carolina. I'd rather surf. And now look at me. He's a hell of a head coach.
But and that also proves that, yes, having some experience from your own perspective does help. But if you work hard and you study hard and you have the best interests of your athletes, you're going to prevail no matter what.
You certainly are. But, Chuck has a pretty good running story. Chuck, you were a pretty damn good runner in your time. So kind of tell us, we like to kind of do this. When was that spark? When did you sit there and you are a big fan of sports? You played multiple sports. You're a pretty damn good basketball player. But when did the spark kick in and go, I'm just a really good runner and that's what I should do? Like, when did that hit you?
Honestly, it goes back to middle school. As Alex astutely said, growing up, the time I could hold the ball, I was playing sports. And primarily it was travel basketball, travel baseball, year round. Never really got into soccer. And then we go to middle school and you figure you're an athlete, 3 seasons, you got to play a sport every season.
Yep.
I'm like, all right, the basketball's locked up. I remember just before 7th grade, I was really interested in going out for football. But back then, much smaller than I am now, my mother was like, no way, you're not playing football, you're going to get hurt. So being the athlete I am, like, I can't just not do something for a season. Like, that's terrible. And they're like, oh, there's soccer. I wasn't as big into soccer as I am now. Back then, I'm like, and they're like, what about this? Someone's like, what about this cross country? I'm like, what is cross country? Like, what do I do? And they're like, you run in a course, you race other people. My sixth grade phys ed teacher said, back then when we all used to have to take like the president's fitness test, whatever, and we had to do the 600-meter run around our school at elementary school. And I still have the school record to this day. I don't know how, but whatever. He said, try cross country. I'm like, all right, I'll go to practice and see what happens. And I go and I meet the coach, and he's a really good guy. I'm actually close with him still. His daughter actually runs at Siena, so I see him all the time. You practice, we go to the first meet. I'm like, what do I do? He's like, follow the course and try to beat as many people as possible. First race, first win, got that itch, and that was pretty much it. And then obviously, I still played my other sports, but running at the beginning was a way to get me really good conditioning for basketball and baseball. But once I got to high school, we had a really good powerhouse New York State team. We were number 2 in the state every year. Back then, there was no Nike Nationals. So for New York State, the biggest race was the Federation Championship, just like in New Jersey MOC. Yep. You make it there as a team, that's like the pinnacle. Mm-hmm. Our team made it every year, and then running in that environment, it just fostered that love for the sport, and then you start taking it more serious. And then, as I was getting towards junior, senior year, I probably could have played any one of 3 sports in college, but my competitive nature was I want to be a Division I athlete, and running is a sport to get me there. I mean, and it just, it fostered that. And then obviously being able to go on a bunch of different visits, and then meeting Coach Pete, who now has been my coach, my mentor, an older brother. We've been together since I was 18 years old, and just kind of taking it from there. But really, that initial spark was Mom saying, you can't play football, you're too small, so you got to pick something else to do. And then, like the rest of us, when you win, that makes you more interested in it.
Yeah, certainly. And it's interesting because everyone has a different spark, right? Yours was Mom saying no, and me and Dave have different ones, but it's like, it's interesting to hear where that starts. Now, you kind of went a little bit over your running journey. Talk about some of like the memories. What were some of like the fond things that you really went into from middle school, high school, over at Marist? Like, it's really interesting because a lot of guests have said to both Dave and I that they don't think about this. And then we kind of ask them, and it just starts, boom, boom, it comes back. You might have a little bit of a different perspective being around it all the time still, and being able to commiserate with the women and stuff like that, talk about your past, but kind of, bring us down memory lane a little, because I'm sure some people are listening, maybe some people from high school that you ran with or college might jump in, and it's like, hey, he told that story.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about, high school, obviously being part of a number 2 state ranked team for most of my career was really, it was something. We had this rhythm. We had this great group of guys who would go out and do the work on our own. And I think that really fostered it in all of us. Sundays our coach would be like, take it off. And the seniors would be like, no, we're getting in the car. We're going to run 10 miles, 11 miles at Green Lake State Park. But I think the biggest thing that kind of gave me a different perspective on our sport is senior year, there was only a Foot Locker, but back then they used to have the USA National Junior Olympic Cross Country Championship, which was huge. And that was after state meets. And if you were a state meet qualifier, you got to buy to the regional. And I remember going out to the regional in Buffalo, and it's freaking Buffalo, it's cold. And the cool thing about it was you could either run as an individual or you could create your own team. So I went out there, and there were 4 other really good runners in my section who all went out there who were thinking they're going to be individuals. And we decide, forget this, let's just form a power team. And we went out, 5 guys from all different high schools, 5 different high schools. We went out to the regional race. We swept it, scored 15 points.
Wow.
And then we went out to Reno to nationals and ran out at altitude, which, looking back, going out there 2 days before running at altitude, not the best way to adjust. but for me, it was a fond memory because in no other sport would I go out and be a basketball and go pick 4 random guys and let's be a team. Right. No, I want to play with my guys. But for our country track, it's different because as much as we are competitors, there's that kinship of we know how hard it is and it's all on us. So we kind of respect each other in that sense. And that was really probably my funnest high school memory was, going out to the nationals in Reno and just kind of representing the school. And, they did a big send off. It was great. And then obviously in college, college is where you make those lifelong brotherhoods of teammates. I mean, we had so many fun stories from college, from where we were as a team. Coming in as a freshman, I'm thinking, all right, I'm a freshman, what am I going to do? And any freshman who was decent in high school is going to come in and be a little cocky, a little edgy. I remember first race, I'd go out and like Division One, I'm third man on the team. Like, this isn't bad. But and then obviously my career took a lot of turns with injuries and the heart condition. So, but like the memories we have busting out, like this is Marist. We were a Catholic school. We would bus to Notre Dame for the National Catholic Championships. Great experience going out there, running on probably the fastest course in the country. I think everybody on my team when I was in college, all their PRs are from that course. My roommate, Mike Melfi, who had previously had the school record for 8K, was on that course until Ramsey Little destroyed it this year. But it was just a great trip. But also sometimes 14 hours on the bus. We had this one teammate, I swear to God, I think we were going to leave him on the side of the road and just tie him up and leave him because we wanted to kill him because he was just annoying. But it's just great. And then obviously, that brotherhood, like, we still have a group text with a bunch of alums. We stay in touch on the holidays and whatnot. Unfortunately, we're all, mid to late 40s. And, since we graduated, we've lost 2 male teammates and a female teammate, so that just kind of, and that just stung, but it also was great to have that support. And just all the stories about nonsense on campus and van rides and doing the 12-hour relay we used to do and driving Coach Pete crazy, which we gave them a lot of the gray hairs. And then other stories that I'm not going to say on air because, I always
You're
tell
still
my
a coach
kids,
at Marist, and you cannot get in trouble.
it's not that. It's not that I would get in trouble, but certain stories, there's never a statute of limitations. Your original your coach can't know everything about what went on.
Absolutely.
That is true. So, Dave, I feel like you have a similar high school experience.
I do. I actually ran,
except you weren't allowed to be friends with anybody else.
well, no, but I did run at the USA TF Junior Olympics my freshman, sophomore year. But it might have been a different me because this one was it was by age. So I was like 13, 14, and then like 14, 15. But I mean, it was great. I went out there with one of my teammates at that time, and we ran, and I think it might have been Buffalo. I don't know where the region was, but I just know that it was cold, and I actually won that race. And then we went out to first year we went out to Mobile, Alabama for cross country, and then that spring we went out to Mount San Antonio College, and I ran the 3K. But like it was more of an individual thing with just one buddy, but not that many people did it really from the state of Jersey because like I know like with my high school coach, he wasn't happy that I was doing it because he wanted to get ready for the winter season. But awesome times though, really, really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean there were great times, and for us, like there were still high school indoor nationals, but for us being upstate New York kids, it's like congratulations, nationals are at the Carrier Dome. Yep. Wow, I get to go 25 minutes from my house to run inside a dome that I've been going to basketball camps at, sitting in seats till I was 4. So it wasn't like this, like, oh, big trip to nationals. Like,
they didn't have. I think we actually talked about this last week. Because I'm 44. I'm not sure. But it sounds like you're in that.
I'm 45. Yeah. Yep.
Alex is the youngin here, but they didn't have all these fast tracks in the winter. If like the Armory wasn't, it was flat. We used to actually go up to West Point every year on a Super Bowl weekend, and we would run a 4x8 there every year. It was just something that we did because like there were no really. You had Princeton, but they didn't really have any high school meets except states. Seton Hall, decent track, but we used to go up to West Point every year and just try to find different meets because there was no bubble like we have here now. There was no Staten Island, and the Armory was nowhere near what it is now. So,
you got that MSG from Milrose, basically, right? When they would put the wood track down.
Yes. And honestly, I'll tell you, that's probably one of my fondest moments. I wasn't on the relay the first year. We sent a 4x8 down there, but a bunch of us went down. There was just something about running in the garden. And yes, is it going to produce fast times? No, those turns are tight as anything. But to run in the garden mecca
on the boards.
on the boards,
Yep.
and to see your teammates run there, and then then you think about how many times a guy like Eamon Coughlin went there and kept
Broken
breaking
4
4 minutes.
I know. It's
Like
crazy.
every year. I mean, you probably can still do it now, God knowing him. But
Yeah, seriously.
it was just
Him and Marcus.
the atmosphere was just unbelievable, and you didn't care about times.
One of my teammates, my junior year, he was a senior, Chris Greer. He actually qualified for the Melrose games. So like 8 of us went up there, took the train, watched him run. It was awesome. And then now Melrose is at the Armory, which makes sense, but there is that lost sense of nostalgia, like of just hearing all those spikes hit the board over and over again, and the 160 meters, 10 laps, mile. There was just like so much history and tradition there. That was an amazing meet. I used to go every year.
Yeah, getting away from Melrose without shin splints was an absolute miracle for distance runners. But Chuck, I want you to talk to some of the youngins out there right now, because you talked about running over at Notre Dame, which was flat and fast, but you ran on Van Cortlandt when it was Van Cortlandt. Now it's not the same. You guys had the full back hills. You had everything there. Kind of tell everyone, like, what was that difference between setting up for Vanny and also doing Notre Dame? Because I think the closest thing maybe they have right now is Paul Short in terms of a fastish race right now. Because Paul Short's kind of similar in a sense. It's fast, but like, Notre Dame is pretty legendary for being extremely fast. So kind of talk about like the difference between gearing up for, Vanny and also the Notre Dame race, which was important to every single Catholic institution. That was a huge race at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a lot of it just goes back to coaching. We trained a lot. Our home course for many years where our home meet was Bowden Park, which is now host of NXR regionals and New York regionals, New York in its own regional. And I knew that course from running there in high school. And Bowden Park is one tough course. It's a mile and a half, 1.6, just gradually, just climbing. And there's strategies involved in that, just like going to run at Vandy. Like Vandy, you start in the flat, then you go into the cow path. All right. Then you go, into the back hills. But then the 8K, it's like you think like, oh, the back hills are done. I'm back in the flat. Nope. You go back into the cow path, you turn, and you go up Cemetery Hill. And the reason why it's called Cemetery Hill is because there's countless deaths of runners over the decades going up that hill. And it's a really physical and a mental test. So your training has to allow you to really be a strong runner on hills, but then also still be good in the flats. For Notre Dame, when we tune up for that, might be a rare occasion where Coach P would put us on the track and he'd have us just bang hard, fast laps. And there you could afford to go out fast because there's nothing to the course. So even if you fade a little bit, you're still going to fade to a PR. I remember one year, a freshman went out and we're like watching him going, what in the hell is he doing? Like, I know it's flat, but you're out there with like the 24-30 guys and you're really a 27-30 guy. So I don't know what you're thinking, but it's like anything, coaches, our jobs are to prepare athletes for different trains, different courses, different races. And, and luckily with us in the Northeast, we have so many challenging courses that when they go to these easier courses, I feel like our kids can really, eat these courses up. Yeah. Like you said, the closest thing we have in the East Coast is Paul Short. Paul Short is flat and fast. Yeah. I mean, big colleges come here for a reason because they want to fast times that accrue points that will allow them to get at-large bids. But then you look at, how, I looked at this year's Foot Locker race. And like Bellbar Park is, it's not a flat course. It's got some roll. But it wasn't shocking to see that the Northeast girls dominated that course as a team.
Crushed it.
Because where do they run their regional race? At Van Cortlandt Park. And, and they do it on the traditional 5K, which had the back hills. College now, when we have 10Ks and 6Ks, like this year, our regional meet, we don't even run the back hills. The only hill in the course is Freshman Hill.
Terrible.
And it's like
so fast. It's fast.
It's fast. But they want it to be spectator friendly. But also I think another reason that I do that is when they do the at-large selection for teams and individuals, for years when we ran Van Cortlandt the old way, our times were slower. So you're not going to get those bids for our individuals or teams because it just looks like they're not running fast.
Yeah.
Where this year we had great conditions. We had so many guys under 30 minutes. It was insane.
Yeah.
And this year we had 6 guys get picked for individual spots where the automatic's 4, and very rarely do you get 1 at large, much less 2 for the same region.
Yep.
So the times this year just, it was a perfect storm of, hey, this is great. And the Northeast region had a bunch of guys go. And there were really good runners who probably, if they're in another region, they probably would have made it, but they were in our region. And, it's just the way that it goes. But yeah, it's about preparation. I'm sure Dave can say the same thing. It's like, you got to the kids have to be able to adapt to any situation. And if they don't, that's on our jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, living like I grew up was pretty much right in central Jersey, but we were considered
He knows where Manchester is. He recruited. He was with me, and he recruited one of our own from Manchester. He recruited Kim. Kim Schwartz was one of his athletes.
I coached her junior senior, great kid. But I would say like we were considered South Jersey. I'm from Tom River, so like every course down there is flat. So we would go down there for sectionals, and we always felt that we had an advantage because we would go to Homedale Park, work out all the time, and then we would run hills. So even if we were close to a team, usually sectionals, by the time we got to groups at Homedale, usually we would have an advantage because our coach did a very good job of preparing us and getting us ready for every different variant of a course out there. So yes, it's very important to know the course and try not to make your first time being there the day of the meet. Try to get there, which, we were afforded to get buses so we could travel places for practice, which was very beneficial.
Yeah, it was definitely true. So I want to switch gears with you, Chuck, because we're going to talk about something that we've never talked about on the podcast. Now,
I'm excited.
Dave and I, we want to really branch out. We've had a lot of runners, but, we want to go into, throwers. We want to go into jumpers. But a region that I think people forget about unless they stay up at like 3 o'clock in the morning for the Olympics is the race walkers. And a lot of people think of race walking. They think of the old woman on the side of the road power walking, right? It's a lot more than that. It's a really tough sport. There's a lot of technique involved. How did you get started? Because now Marist is known as a women's race walking, hub right now. You're doing really good recruiting some extremely talented young ladies to come and race walk over at Marist. How did that get started? What made you interested and look at it and go, there's something here that I can tap into?
Yeah. So it all started with our first race walker, Christy LeCursey. She actually got into Marist. She's from Somers High School. Ran cross country and track in high school, but she was primarily a race walker. Decided she wanted to come to Marist. She reached out to Coach Pete and myself and said, "Hey, I'm gotten to Marist. I'm coming. Could I, walk down to the team? These are my times as a runner, but this is what I did in high school as a race walker." And, for those listeners who don't know, New York State is huge for race walking.
Is it?
It's one of those states. It's in their state championship meet indoors. And they actually added it back to the state championship meet outdoors. So there are a lot of race walkers in New York State, primarily Long Island. Long Island's a hub. I'll get into the reason why in a little bit. So Christy came to us, and met with us. Sweet kid. Parents are great.
Yeah, Christy was awesome.
It's like, what do you think? I'm like, well, Pete, we've never coached a race walker before. But, I just looked at it as another challenge, as a coach to make yourself better. Obviously, my forte right now is coaching cross country, middle distance runners, etc. But when I first started, when you're a first time college coach and you're an assistant, you're coaching whatever group of athletes they are throwing at you.
Yep, absolutely.
So before I took over the women, I coached all the sprinters, all the hurdlers, all the jumpers, throwers. And to me, it made me a better, more well-rounded coach because some of those events I actually did in high school because I had one of those psycho coaches who wanted to win every dual meet by 200 points. So you would be doing 3 running events and 2 field events. Probably why my knees have no cartilage left in them from triple jump, long jump, etc. But I worked on events that weren't my primary focus. And I took that to test. To be a good coach, you got to learn it. There was a stretch where, in Quest, I remember some of these girls, we had 2 girls that were from Connecticut, Allison Keller and Kristen McDevitt. For 4 years in a row, Marist had the hurdle champion in the MAC conference between those 2 girls. Incredible. We won 4 straight years. They were 2 years apart in age. And then, obviously we had a lot of other great things going on with jumpers with Eli Bisnet-Cobb, who still has our high jump record. And now he's the director of sports medicine at San Diego. Adam Waterbury. And so I learned about all these events. So to me, I'm like, well, this is just me learning another event. All right, learning about the race walk. As Dave said, there's a lot of technique. You have to have pitch perfect form so you don't get flagged. And people don't realize if you get X number of paddles, then you get a red card. If you get you get a few red cards, you're done. You're disqualified. And it doesn't even matter what point in the race. This happened to one of our girls, Lauren Harris, who was by far the best race walker we had. When she graduated high school, she was the national record holder. And then that got broken by Taylor Ewert, who's done at Arkansas running. I'll never forget, twice in one season, Lauren was DQ'd in the last 40 meters of a race. One was at the USA Indoor Championships where she was way up there in a medal position. And the other was at the Millrose Games one of the years where she was en route to a PR. And then subsequently, it was the same judge that DQ'd her in high school. So she's like, but it's like, and it's just the little intricacies. You can't break your knee. You can't lift. Like one foot has to have contact with the ground at all times. Like people, like even our own athletes, they'll try to say, oh, let's see if I can do it. I'm like, nope, flag. Like it's not easy. And these women have put so much torque on their hips, so it's a whole different animal in terms of training. But when I started training race walk, I know a lot of coaches who coach professional race walkers all over the country. I've gotten to know them because it's a very small, tight-knit group because there's not a lot of them. And a lot of those groups, primarily, they just walk. That's all they do for the training is just walking miles and miles and miles into a workout. Where I kind of took an approach is like, I'm a running coach who's going to coach walkers. In order for them to maximize their fitness, they need to be better runners first.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, if they have a higher, aerobic threshold, they have a stronger fitness base, that's going to allow them to walk faster because they'll be able to maintain that pace. And that was kind of not shunned, but like a lot of race walk coaches like, well, what do you mean you haven't run it a lot? Like they're race walkers. And we noticed all of the girls, started with Christy and then Katie Miali and then, Lauren Harris and then Kayla Shapiro transferred. And then, that trio that were training together, Katie, Lauren, and Kayla, we were at the Olympic trials in 2021, not 2020. Yeah. And I looked around when I was there. I'm like, how many other college coaches can say they have 3 athletes here at the trials competing? Very few. And I don't care what event it is. To compete at the Olympic trials, you are competing at the highest level in your sport. And then again, it just breeds. And now we have, 2 more girls on the team this year. We have Melissa Scioto, who's a sophomore, and we have Mia Priori, who's a freshman. We also have probably one of the top race walkers in New York who wants to come next year. And a big part of it is it's not a Division I sport. It's not an NCAA event. But our athletic director supports it because he knows that they compete at the highest level. That's good PR for the school. So having athletes in Olympic trials. When Lauren was here, she made 3 different Team USA teams when I was coaching her. She, was over in Finland. She went to Beijing. The one year we were supposed to go to Mexico City. She couldn't go because it conflicted with her sister's high school graduation, so she had to skip that one. But it's something that we've kind of grown, and our approach is unique compared to other places because we emphasize combining running and walking. People ask me, like, well, what kind of workouts do you give them? I'm like, all right, if you're training someone for a mile, what are you going to do? What kind of workouts do you give a miler? And they could spit them out. You do the same thing with a walker. They're just walking, and their paces are for their goal. So it's not like you're trying to reinvent the wheel. You are making it fit for their events and what they're doing. And the amount of success we've seen, the leaps and bounds, these girls come in and PR by so much. It's a lot of fun. And obviously it's gotten me into this, Maria Miftakafi, who's U.S. record holder, multi-time Olympian, phenomenal athlete. I mean, she came back and competed at the World Championships this year. She had her daughter only a few years ago, and she's just still competing at the highest level. Getting to know her and her husband, who's her coach, it's been a really great thing. And then just when we go to, like, this year we were at the USA Under-20 Championships, and this year USA Track and Field, I'll give them a shout out to a really good thing. They brought over a bunch of Ukrainian athletes and housed them so they can compete and train in the States leading up to, World Championships. Now, typically a USA Under-20, it's an American event. But they had a girl from the Ukraine, 17 years old. She was ranked at the time number 3, number 4 in the world. Wow. And they let her in to the event. And you could tell because when she's going off, she was like See you later. I'm like, holy. I'm like, I've seen fast race walkers, and then I've seen this girl. And then, they were all talking to me because this girl apparently wants her to come to the States and continue walking the States. So this is somebody that we may reach out to because she's looking for a good education. Then, from a PR move, I mean, girl was like second up there in the world this year. So I think I could probably sell that to my president.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just every year we get walkers who look here. And, it's something that I take great pride in because these girls, they work super hard. Like Lauren Harris, her last time at Milrose where, it was her and Taylor Ewert. So they're both not professionals. They went 1-2 in the Milrose games in the mile championship.
Wow.
And she walked it was 6:36 high. 99% of the population can't run a 6:36 mile. And this girl walked it.
I can't run a 6:36 anymore. Like I get out and I try to do a 6:36, I collapse.
I have a question for you. So when you're recruiting athletes for the race walk, do you find that to be a very difficult thing? Because I know like here in New Jersey, it's really not anything that is prominent in any way. Or are you blessed and lucky because you do live in a state that where it is a highly participated thing?
Yeah, we're blessed. We're lucky because it's such a big thing in New York. So every recruiting cycle, I get race walkers. I get multiple race walkers. And don't get me wrong, like I had a bunch this year, but we also said we're looking for good race walkers, but we're looking for people who we think can compete at the national level. Like, you come here, you're going to the USA Under Championships. You're going to qualify for senior championships. And eventually the goal is to bump you up to the 20K distance and make the Olympic trials. We're not just taking all comers. Like, I want high level competitive girls who, quite frankly, are going to put in the work. So it does help. But I think the biggest thing that helps us is we're a Division I school whose athletic department supports it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Typically the race walk has been a Division III event. And then it's other schools that are not, you got NAIA schools and some of these, they aren't strong academic institutions. And a lot of these girls, they want to compete, but they also want a really good education. So that kind of helps us. They have a place where they have a coach who's been doing it for a long time, who's going to support them and train them the right way. They're going to get a first-rate education. Not only that, they're part of a cross-country and track team that really supports them. Like, their teammates get into it.
Yeah.
And we have an event coming up in January, the second Friday in January. The coach at St. Thomas Aquinas, he has a girl who competed in race walk in high school. She actually looked at Marist, but finances were an issue. So she's there, and he reached out to myself and Pete saying, "Hey, I want to put on a mile because she needs the time for Milrose. No entry fee. Bring your squad here so we can just get it going." Because to make it to Milrose, I don't care if you're in the race walk, it doesn't matter. You're at the Milrose games and you're rubbing shoulders with the Abby Steiners of the world, who's going to probably be there this year, and some of the most phenomenal athletes you'll ever see. And even when we go out to Oregon, your coaches, that trip to the Olympic trials was something I will never forget. Just the fans, just how Tracktown USA, it was feverish, and and they had the race walk in a separate town in Springfield next to it. And we're thinking, all right, it's going to be really early in the morning because it was hot that year. They're doing a 1K loop 20 times. and we get there, and there's like a live radio broadcast of the event. People are lining the streets of Springfield. And I was like, I've never seen this many people.
I know. I was jealous getting texts from Chuck, just pictures of, here I am doing this at the trials. Here I am doing that. And I'm just like, I used to be a coach with you. Can you help a brother out here? But no, it's a really cool thing you have going on there with race walking. I remember my first introduction to race walking when I thought it was kind of cool and funny. Again, I did wake up at 3 a.m. during the Olympics, and there was an Ecuadorian guy who was a really good race walker. I'm Ecuadorian.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he's a legend. He won Olympics multiple times, and even into his freaking 50s, he was competing at a high level. And I knew who he was, so I watched it, and I noticed, for the first thing I found funny is when they get the flags, the judges run up and throw it in their faces as they're walking by them, trotting by them, hey, you've been flagged, and then they run away. And I was like, wait, what the hell? What is that? Could you imagine in track, running a 5K?
They just come up with a paddle in your face,
could you imagine running a 5K and then all of a sudden, a judge running up to you and just paddling you and then just running away? I saw that and I was like, this is interesting. And just to look, and especially like I'm comparing it to the men. These men are walking sub 6 minute miles or right around 6 minute miles for 20K. Like, that's incredible just to walk that fast. And you talk about Lauren doing a 6:38 solo mile. Like, it is the athletic like ability that they need is equivalent to anyone that is on the track. Race walking is serious business. Now, what are the challenges with you having to switch gears? Because, you're not an exclusive race walking coach. You still are, the director, head coach of women's cross country track and field. So what is it like for you kind of switching gears, going from, doing your middle distance girls, working with Terry to do the sprints and everything. But then having to also focus on this, like, how is that for you with the gear switching in terms of training?
In terms of just the practicality of just coaching and training, it's for me now it's seamless. I'm doing it so long. You work on them and they're usually at the track, one at the track, and that really gives me a good time to very much nitpick their form, work on your arms, work on your posture, make sure you're driving off. A lot of things. The challenge that happens with those athletes and those events, there are no NCAA events that host race walkers. So every event they go to, it's a USATF sponsored event, or it's like the one coming up at Ocean Breeze. It's a special event, or it's the Millrose Games. And to get into Millrose, you have to have a qualifying time. So sometimes we got to go wherever the race takes us. And, so before break, the girls went up and they walked at an open race in Massachusetts. Because USATF New England has a pretty big race walk contingent. Actually, Katie Miali, lives and works in Boston. And so she's up there and she trains there and she's still competing at a super high level. Lauren and Kayla just took a little time off from competing in competition. Lauren's finishing up her master's, but we talked about, hey, we got, 2024 cycle. You're still one of the most talented, naturally gifted people.
Yeah.
But like those, and those are like on Sunday meets, like Sunday USATF meets, like all comers. You get the older guys, the kids, so we have some meets where I'll be coaching at a track meet. I could be at BU for 2 days, come home, and then I got to turn around and drive to Massachusetts to get them into a competition. And for us, it's worth it because then they can get into Millrose. And if they walk well enough in Millrose, then they qualify for USA Senior Nationals. Not just like junior nationals, like the USA Senior National. And our girls have qualified for that multiple times. One year, we shipped them they were out in Washington State. And then, 1 year was actually at Ocean Breeze. And that year was funny because, that was the year actually, we had all three girls in the race. Lauren got DQ in that race, but Kayla Shapiro had probably one of her best races ever. She finishes third overall, but she can't take the prize money because she's an amateur.
Yep, correct. Which is incredible.
So we had to sign waivers, and they kick it to the school, because as soon as she took that money, she would not be able to compete for the college. And in the college, when we travel, they pay for all the travel. Like when we go to trials, we go out to probably Oregon this year because, I'm assuming Mia's going to make USAs. They're paying for us to go there. They really, our athletic director, for, some of the slack he gets from people and some of the guff he gets from people, he's really supported us in that. So I do thank him for that. And it's one of those things where we're kind of known.
Tim Murray there. Yeah. He deserves credit definitely for this. And he has, I have to say, he has always been supportive, of the runners. He hears us out. Anytime we want to talk to him about anything, I do give Tim credit for that. And we do give him flack. Don't get me wrong. A lot of the seniors have in the senior meetings, it happens. But, he's always been, for the most part, fair. And definitely in this area, he's been extremely, good with you and what you're doing. Like you say, it's definitely symbiotic. You're getting good PR, but he doesn't have to. And the president of the school doesn't have to. So it's really cool that they're doing that.
Yeah. So, it's a tradition. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Do you find or notice that there's any push to get race walking added as an NCAA event, or do you think that there's not enough interest throughout the whole country? Are there certain regions of the country where it's definitely more popular than others? And
I mean, there's definitely regions, but it's expanding. I mean, they have a great club in Illinois, the Elgin Sharks Track Club, and their director, she is on the national board for USATF. She's the race walking chairperson. There are many people who've been behind the scenes pushing to have it added back as an NCAA event, because back in the 80s, when Marist was a track team, a little before Coach Pete, they actually had male race walkers on the team because they could compete, because they were still D3. Once they made them with D1, that kind of changed. But there's still people that are pushing for it. They're like, it's an Olympic event. It's a world championship event. How can it not be an NCAA event?
It's a part of athletics in general.
Yeah. And yes, there's a bigger portion of the country in the East Coast that has it, but there's a big contingent in Ohio. Now there's good race walkers down in Texas. There's a young girl up in Maine who's good. And there's a bunch of kids in California on the West Coast who are doing it. And, because for a lot of them, maybe been decent runners, but their path to maybe Olympic glory is in the race walk.
Yep.
We talked about, the girl who has all of our high school national records and USA under 20 records, Taylor Ewart. I'll never forget the year, Lauren made the world team and Taylor made the world team. It was their freshman year at USA under 20s at Indiana University. It was like 110 degrees and track was steaming. Taylor Ewart goes down to North Carolina, wins the national title in steeplechase, gets in the back of her parents' van, puts on the compression boots. They drive up to Indiana. Then the next day she wins the 10K in the race walk. And then next thing you know, her and Lauren are roommates, and they're on the way to Finland to represent Team USA.
Jesus.
That's a hell of a weekend there.
Yeah. So she's a phenomenal talent, and she's down in Arkansas running. But when, they went there, they said, yeah, you continue to walk. But the coaches aren't coaching her. Anytime she walks, it's her mom. Her mom's a race walk coach. So I've gotten to know them pretty well just because it's such a small, tight-knit group. Everybody kind of knows everybody in the race walk community. And honestly, I don't know how much she's walked in the last year or so. She's been battling injuries. She's running well. In Arkansas, obviously, they're our program, always have battling that's harder. But my thing is, I know how talented this girl is, and her surest bet to be an Olympian is in that sport. And I just hope that she doesn't just completely go away from it, because she really, I've seen talented athletes, and she was just kind of like a unicorn. I was like, holy Jesus.
Yeah. Now,
Taylor, if you're listening, post-grad, talk to Chuck.
I will definitely, I'll definitely admit this. I'm pretty naive when it comes to race walking. I didn't even really know that there are multiple events of that take place on the actual track. Usually when I see it, it's like Alex said in the Olympics, it's more like a marathon
20K on the road. Yeah.
It's on the roads. But I know that it usually ends on the track at a lot of places. So at what distance do they go from track to more of a road type atmosphere?
I think usually, track, they do, in my house, 3Ks probably, 5K at Penn relays. Everyone knows the 5Ks at Penn, bright and early on that Saturday morning before anybody gets in there. And then, they do 10Ks as well at USA Junior Nationals. They've done 10Ks at Senior Nationals. Once you get above the 10K, you're hitting 20Ks. The men do 50Ks. That's all on the roads.
Yeah.
But you see a lot of track groups that will do 5Ks on the roads or 10Ks on the road. Just because there's less turning. So if you get a decent 5K loop, it's pretty flat. In weather conditions, you can kind of roll pretty good. But anything over 10K, it's automatically going to be on the roads, just because it's too big. Listen, there was one year that actually did a 20K on the track at USA's in Des Moines, Iowa. That year I couldn't make it, had an obligation, so Coach Pete went. Alex knows the sicko he is. He loved the fact that there were 50 laps of race walking on the oval.
Pete's also an ultra marathoner, so he's a sick individual in that sense. We love Pete, but Pete's crazy.
So
he said it was great. I'm like, okay.
So with the race walking, like you're talking about the technique, I know when I watch it, it just looks like there's such, like you mentioned earlier, such a torque on the hips and different than running. Are there different stretches or different drills that you have to put your athletes through so that they can kind of build up different muscles that they might use from running?
So there's a lot of different, we all as coaches use dynamic drills all the time for our athletes.
Yep.
There's a whole different set of dynamic drills that race walkers use to loosen their hips up, loosen their shoulders up, with arm swings. We have them do a lot of band exercises to strengthen the hips. Even their knees. Like, I'll never forget Marissa when we're at Oregon this year at what I call Space Station Track, because it's so new and it's something to see. And it was her first 10K ever, and she finished, and she's like, the next day she's like, I don't know if I can stand on my knees. Like, it's a lot of. And meanwhile, someone who would run a 10K, they'd be beat up, but they would not be in nearly as much pain as she was, just because the amount of torque.
Right.
And again, because you can't bend the knee, so you've got to land straight-legged. You can't lift. That puts an undue amount of strain, on your knees. And then you create a lot of force just cranking those arms a good pop.
Oh yeah.
It's funny, you see someone like Maria McTecoffey, when she's rolling, I mean, those arms there cranking, and it's just like, and people are like, how is she moving that fast by just walking? It takes a lot of strength, effort, but there's a lot of form drills and techniques that's specific to the sport that really allows them. There's a lot of drills they do in the mirror to make sure their form is right, and we take videos to make sure on the treadmill, make sure they're not lifting and this and that, because the slightest thing, a judge could just be like, oh, there's battle. And the one thing that's different about race walk too is it's a sport that has, and Alex will love this, there's a penalty box. You can get put in the penalty box in a longer race walking event, specifically the trials. And what happens if you get X number of paddles, they'll pull you and put you in the penalty box, and you're in there. It's almost like hockey. You're in there for a set amount of time before you're released, and your time is still rolling, and your competition is going away. And then they let you out. But after so many fouls, then you're just DQ'd automatically. But, there's no other track event in the world where, you could be running a 5K and, here comes, Lopez Lemon. Oh, wait, you stepped on the white line too many times. You're in the box for 30 seconds. In a race like that, it's over. The race is done. So it's like,
you might as well get into a fist fight, get a 5-minute major for fighting and put in the box. You might as well just get that done. Okay, it's a bad hockey joke. Sorry. Yeah. So race walking is amazing. I love it. You went through some challenges though over the last few years, like all the coaches that we've talked to. In terms of COVID, everyone had different things going on. Every university had different challenges with the way their presidents and things handled. What COVID was, I know Marist was pretty damn strict, and a lot of universities were, but I think Marist definitely had a high bar there. What were the challenges for you as a coach? What was the NCAA doing to coaches in terms of what you guys were allowed to do, what you weren't allowed to do during that period? And then kind of jump into, too, recruiting, transfer rules, and how that's kind of come back, what the effect it has.
Yeah. I think the most challenging thing during COVID, and you kind of touched on this with, President Murray, was every school handled it differently, to a different degree of severity.
Yeah. So
there was clearly not a level playing field at all across the board for college athletics, not just running, just college athletics in general. We had a very conservative president who, at the smallest, stress of an outbreak, he was shutting down every team. And when you shut down, you can't meet the kids. You can't, we couldn't even go off campus with the kids for practice. And as Alex knows, we used to have an indoor track that got covered up. Our primary practice facilities are SUNY New Paltz for an indoor track, and we would go to Marist College. But during the pandemic, those schools weren't letting us come to use their facilities because they did not want to bring other outside students.
Did you have to do the Terry special on North Field and create the cone track?
Terry did create the cone track. But it was very challenging for athletes because, they didn't have any off-site places to train, which is very hard for track athletes. I did a lot with our athletes in the upstairs, new track indoors with starts and technical stuff, but the training wasn't the same. You got to be creative. But it also, I think, when they see other schools being able to fully compete and travel and go to meets and do this, that, and the other, and we're not, that really hurt their motivation. Then it really starts affecting their mental health.
Yeah.
Like that year of COVID when they canceled cross country in the fall, they had the first instance of winter cross country ever in the NCAA history.
Yep.
I remember that.
We had winter cross country. So for us, we had our MAC championship. It was down in Jersey in the golf course. They actually did a really good job. But other schools in our conference actually got to race a couple of times before MACs. Because of our rules, our first race was that race.
Ridiculous.
Not only that, we had a lot of girls who weren't healthy because we did get hit with a big outbreak of COVID on our team.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them, I literally went down there with a skeleton crew. And, we just, the girls who raced were happy to race. But they knew they were just,
all things considered too. They performed. Marist. One thing Marist is, they are gritty and they are always game. Men and women, we are always a grit squad. So, and that comes from you and Pete definitely. But yeah, go ahead.
But it's hard when they go into knowing the other teams all ran on through races ahead of time.
Right.
They shook off the rust. You're literally breaking the rust off at a conference championship. And then it was just interesting. I think a lot of schools, it affected them differently. I think we were a school that really got hurt. Not just our sport, but every sport kind of felt the brunt of it. And, we talked about last year, last year we're coming out of COVID. It was kind of the first normalish year we've had, because that year of COVID, we had no preseason. There was no intersession. There was no getting the athletes together. And
so hard.
And they were all kind of isolated. They were isolated, which really hurt team chemistry, and especially – my current juniors who were freshmen then, that is the worst way to enter college as a freshman. And really, none of those girls competed. They saved their entire – because at a certain point as a coach, you got to decide, is it worth putting them out there if they're not prepared, or do I redshirt them and let them really get another season? And a lot of athletes have their COVID seasons because of that. It was very challenging that recruiting-wise, because that entire year, the NCAA was in a full year dead period. We could have no contact in person on campus with recruits.
Yep.
So my current sophomore class, it was all Zoom calls. And I'll never forget when they reported to preseason their freshman year last year. It was the first time I met most of them in person. And I remember one girl, I tell her this joke all the time, because she's in the Zoom calls. She's got a young face, and she's sitting next to her mom. And I'm like, man, she looks like she's like, her face, she's got like 5'1", 5'2". She gets to our summer team barbecue, because we actually could have that. Like 5'7", 5'8". I'm like, man, I'm not gonna lie, I thought you were so tiny. like I couldn't tell on Zoom. But it was just weird having to recruit solely through that platform. And we did get a good class. And then even, the current freshmen this year, like last year we could have recruits, but they had to stay in hotels, so they didn't get to stay on campus. This year is the first year where it's normal. Recruits are staying on campus. I feel like the playing field's getting level again. But I know, Alex, you brought up, the transfer portal and everything that's going on with that. And it doesn't affect, I think, schools like us as much, but at the bigger schools, it's like the Wild Wild West. If a kid thinks the coach isn't giving him a fair shake, I'm on the transfer portal, I'm gone.
Question for you with that. So have you experienced, because we get some high level athletes, like you have done fantastic job, especially keeping our local talent home. Like you're very good, because New York, New Jersey, PA, you recruit hard from those three states, and you're getting some of the best athletes in the country because we are gifted to have that. Have you come up to the situations where some of our lead girls are looking at you going, I think I might be able to do better X? Like, have you had those conversations right now with the transfer portal and the way it is?
Thankfully, luckily, no, we haven't. The one thing since I took over the women's program in 2008 in the fall, we have not had one girl leave Marist and transfer from the school. So to me, that means we did a good job of showing them that this is the right place and the right fit for them.
Yeah. But
obviously, it's tough. We see it all the time. I see girls in our conference from other schools that run really well, and the vultures are circling. But we experienced it firsthand on the men's side. During that year of COVID, we had no cross country, so we're all hoping, all right, indoor track, let's go. The MAC decides to cancel indoor track.
Yep.
Now let me preface it. The year before, we had a football player who never ran indoor track in high school, came out, Glenmore Leonard Osborne, who, as we're on this call, has been texting me pictures of starts so I can look at them. He comes out, runs indoor track the first time, MAC champion, wins the MAC title in the 60. As a freshman, was third in the IC4As in the 60. And we're all big goals. All right, runs, PR in the 200. Never ran in a bank track. So that was a little weird. Watch this first one, he's a little squirrely coming around like, whoa, what's going on at BU, which is a bouncy track. And we're thinking, all right, big goals, big sights. And then the Mac cancels indoor. So he's still training. I have him doing the meets at the Armory because the Armory has so many meets during the week.
Yeah.
So he's running unattached. And he ran some really good times early on, like early season. At one point, he was like top 20 in the world in the 60.
Yep.
And what happens to the transfer portal? People start getting in his ear. This coach he works with, this one's doing this. And next thing you know, he talks to myself and Coach Pete, and he said with the uncertainty of the Marist situation, he just owed it to himself to take a look. He puts himself in the portal, and I can tell you within a week, the number of schools that contacted Pete and I regarding him. And this isn't like, okay schools. Alabama, LSU, Oklahoma, Michigan, Penn State, you name it. Like every sprint school, was contacting us, and he ended up. And again, this is when he couldn't take visits. So he was just going on, meeting with the coaches, meeting athletes on Zoom, getting a good feel, looking for the best deal. So Glenn got offered a full scholarship to Louisville. He accepted it. I talked to him about it. I said, I'm always going to be there as a coach. We're very close. I said, you got to do what's best for you and your family. And then last year he gets sent to Louisville, and we stayed in contact all summer, et cetera, et cetera. And I can't tell you, I can't get into specifics, but, the times I would talk to him, I just knew I could sense in his voice, something wasn't right. Like something wasn't the same.
And we have to mention about Glenn. Glenn is the fastest man in MAC history right now. He has the record for the MAC 100, if I'm correct, right?
He has the MAC record in the 60 indoors, the 100 outdoors, and probably will have more by the end of this year.
He is a legitimate potential sub 10, 20 and change talent in terms of all that. So we also had an extremely talented sprinter in Jeremy Mooney already there too.
Yes.
So we have two of the best sprinters in the MAC on the same team, which Marist doesn't normally get to say. But yeah, so I gotta give a shout out to him there. So continue. Sorry about that. I just wanted to jump in there talking about how talented Jeremy, Glenn actually is.
Yeah. So, he goes to Louisville, and listen, the coach down there is great. He's a phenomenal guy. He ran at Houston. He made Olympic trials. They got some great sprinters. They invested millions into a brand new track.
Yep.
But he got there and things just, weren't the way he thought it was going to be. And without having to take that official visit to see what life would be like living in Louisville, Kentucky for a kid who grew up in White Plains, New York.
Yep.
It's a different world.
Yeah.
And then he reaches out to me, and, and at one point he talked to the coaches there, and he's just like, I want to come home. I want to come back to Marist. He missed his teammates. He missed his friends. People don't know about this. I was talking to, a really good sprinter at Boston University, Toby. They don't realize he played running back this year for the conference and actually was all conference as an all-purpose athlete.
Football player, yeah.
Because, on a football field, no one's going to catch him. And he came back, and last year he ran really well. We had a fluke indoor accident. We were at a track meet. He was running well. Potentially he was closing in on being top 16 and going NCAAs. And he's doing a start at BU, and I'll never forget this. The student worker was setting up the hurdles. Glenn looks down, looks up, sees the lane's clear, gets in his blocks, his head's down. He's like, my lane's clear, I can go. And the kid throws a hurdle right in front of him after he takes off. And it was just instinct. Most people, we would push it over. He tried to sidestep it and tweaked his groin. So then he didn't run the conference meet, but then he bounced back and won IC4As in the 60, and then went out last year and, led a really strong sprint squad with himself, with Jeremy Mooney, then another football player, Reed Dexter, came out. And this kid early season ran 11.4. By the end of the season, I had him running 10.68.
Reed was fantastic. Jesus.
Yeah. And he had a great, he was the rookie of the meet at the MAC meet because that was his freshman year of outdoor. He was the performer of me. And then our 4x1 was second at the IC4A championships, running 41.02, just missed breaking 41 seconds.
Yeah.
But that was just that, he went on the portal, and sometimes the grass isn't always greener, but these kids get people in their heads, and they don't have to tell their coach. That's what's the scary part. They don't need to tell their coach, I'm going onto the portal. If they want, they can just go to their senior women's administrator and say, put me on the portal. and the coach has no say about it. I mean, and essentially it's just craziness. And it's same thing we're kind of dealing with now. Ramsey Little, who ran great for us in cross country, he wants to look at grad school and he's looking at stuff for turf management, which we obviously don't offer. So he's on the portal, and the number of calls that Pete's already gotten from people and big time programs, because when you run 23:38 and run low 29s and 10K for cross country, a lot of schools that'll kind of line up and take you.
So definitely a lot of challenges there. And, I guess, and we're blessed, like you and Pete are very good at not only the X's and O's, but you build relationships with the athletes. You guys always have, that's why I'm still very close with both of you being, I was not a good runner at Marist, had good potential, but I did not have a good career. But, still very close because you guys really invest the time in, all the athletes that go through there. So you have a special thing there. Now, I have a question, and it's related to something that we've talked about a whole bunch, Dave. New Jersey has been messing around with the meet of champions in cross country and in track and field in terms of potentially, making changes to the team aspect, potentially wiping it away. They've been trying to do away with a lot of the big tournaments. They did away with the basketball one. You, as a coach who recruits heavily out of New Jersey, how are the changes in the meet of champions affecting you in recruiting, and what would that do to you as a coach if the last time you'd get to see them is at groups and it wouldn't be at the big meet where some of these athletes can really show how they could do in a big time setting?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely would affect the way I think a lot of coaches look at recruits, and not just recruits, but then you're getting to the point of, how much athletic game am I going to offer a kid? And sometimes it's really recruiting them well, and then they pop a big meet. That's going to be, it's another opportunity for that kid to really shine for college coaches. So, it hurts us as recruiters because it's one less championship meet. But it hurts the kids so much more.
Absolutely.
Because our sport, as you guys know, it's not like softball or baseball or lacrosse. Like, listen, one of my students that I had where I teach at a local high school, I was his geometry teacher. Currently, right now, he's the number 2 ranked prospect in the class of 2024 in baseball. The first day of high school, when he's allowed to verbally commit, he verbally committed to Ole Miss on a full ride the first day of high school.
Wow.
And I love Owen. Owen's going to get drafted at high school. He's literally the number 2 ranked prospect in the class of 2024.
Incredible.
But our sport, we're not offering kids scholarships as freshmen. You guys both know the talent can change. It can swing both ways between freshman and senior year, and especially in female runners.
Females, definitely.
Yeah. Females, you get these girls who come out of like middle school, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, they fly, and then the bodies change. They hit puberty or they get hurt because, let's be honest, when they're that fast at that age, they get pushed too hard.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
They're mismanaged. They're mismanaged.
Mom and dad are living their life through them.
Right.
I've seen it happen so many times, and I'm like, what do you get to
these kids get pushed, and by the time they're seniors, they're burnt out physically and mentally.
Yep.
So for us, we bank on senior year. Yes, juniors junior year we can have official visits. We haven't done them yet because I want to see what they do junior year, and then you build those relationships. In senior year, this is their time when they really want to shine. So when you take away meets like that, they could argue like, oh well, those girls can go run an NXR. That's great, but now you're talking about a gap in between races.
Yeah.
Where if they're peaking, now you can extend a peak without a race in between. Or let's say you're training and now you tweak an ankle and now you go to NXR and you're running all taped up. And in your head, kids are like, I'm running for a scholarship. That's a lot of pressure to put on a 17-year-old kid. So I think the decisions that are being made at the high school level for some of these meets and policies they're talking about, it's adults making decisions with what they think is in the best interest of the sport, but they really aren't looking out for the kids.
Right.
And me as a college coach, but me also as a parent of 2 high school teenagers, like if my kids were in that situation, I'd be livid because you're hurting the kids.
Absolutely.
So it's just one of those things that, it's really hard. And like you said, Alex, like, primarily we have always recruited the Northeast, but in the last couple of years, you guys know this, everybody recruits the Northeast.
Yeah.
The Northeast is a powerhouse for cross country.
We talk all the time about how we have Sidney McLaughlin, a thing Mo, like we could do, and
all from New Jersey.
Yeah, like Allie Wilson. We could recruit a 4x8 from
Olivia
New Jersey.
Baker.
Could win Olivia Baker.
Olivia
They could
Baker,
actually
yeah.
win the world. Just a 4x8 in New Jersey could be world champions in the women. It is insane, the talent in Jersey alone.
Yeah.
But the Northeast in general, Long Island,
Yeah.
New York City, it's incredible. It really is. Connecticut.
I mean,
yeah. Oh my God.
I mean, one of my closest friends in coaching was the former Iona coach, Ricardo Santos, who's now the distance coach at Stanford.
Yep.
And I'm like, can you just stay on your coast? I mean, it doesn't affect me. Listen, I'm not going up against Stanford in recruiting, but other schools are. And he is coming in a second. And he is coming here, and he's taking every Northeast kid he can.
And his pipeline to London is ridiculous. Ricardo, stop it.
So as a coach at Marist, which I guess I would label that a mid-major college.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Absolutely.
When you're going out on the recruiting trail, do you have like kids that you're like, all right, like I really don't have a chance in getting this kid. They're going to go to the Stanfords, the Oregon. So do you kind of know what level kid that you're going to recruit and maybe not that you don't want the other athletes, but do you kind of know like I really don't have a chance getting this kid?
Yeah.
Like, is there some sort of
it's a mid-major coach. Obviously you got to be selective. Obviously you hope and pray you can get one of those kids to get interested and go after them. You send them letters and you just express interest, but like it's hard. So you got to find like, all right, where are my kids? Where's that level of kid who I think can fit in my program? And again, and Alex knows this from being around our program, we look for kids that can make an immediate impact. And in cross country, girls can make an impact right away in college because they're running 5Ks and 6Ks. They're not running 8Ks and 10Ks.
Right. And we have the academic challenge too at Marist. Right. We have the academic challenge where we're not just going out and getting the best athlete, which Chuck would be able to grab probably a lot more if we demand high grades. We demand excellence. How many years have in a row have our ladies especially won the MAC and GPA? It's a thing
every year I've coached.
It's a thing we do, and the men are right there. If they don't win, they're pissed. Like it's a real big standard at Marist, and that's also a challenge for you, Chuck.
Yeah, and it's also fought. But Dave, I'm not just looking at what are the really good girls I have a chance at. I'm also looking at like who are the under the radar kids who come from a bad high school program with a coach who's a teacher who takes a stipend, who runs 15 to 20 miles a week and has all this potential,
who played soccer 3 years and just came out for cross country as a senior. Yeah. So other coaches might not know exactly who that athlete is.
So we're looking for. I'm looking at those kids like, all right, who are those impact stud recruits that can really slot into our varsity group and really help us? Because obviously our goal is to try to finish as high in the conference, and But I'm also like, all right, if a kid's a really good kid and he fits in, like, and they're decent. Like, and I tell girls, like, they'll ask, like, what's your recruiting standards? And I'll tell them, like, if you can't run this, thank you for your interest, but like, I really don't, like, if you can't keep up in a training run, that's not going to help you.
Yeah.
So, but then you get some girls who come in who were under the radar recruits, came in, didn't have athletic aid, and they turn out to be monsters. And I can think of two right off the top of my head who are two of our all-time great runners, that are still on school records, and Denise Groen and Shea Bohan, and they were non-scholarship athletes.
Incredible. Yeah.
Who came here.
The glory days were with Denise and Shea in that group.
They came here, they bought into our system, they worked super hard, and it shows that, if you get good coaching and consistent coaching and you're surrounded by a team that has the same motivation and drive, there's no telling what you can do. Even one of New Jersey's own, Gianna Tedeschi, who went to Montgomery High School.
Yeah, was amazing.
Gianna was an okay high school runner. She never broke 19 minutes in a 5K. She was decent. Like, when she came here, I gave her a little bit of aid, not that much. And now she left here as probably right now the second greatest distance runner we ever had. So it's like
tough as nails. Tough as absolute nails, Gianna.
So we try to go after those kids, Dave. But I also don't mind getting the kids that some people just kind of overlook and be like, they'll be okay. But it's also forced me because of so many people recruiting in the Northeast. There's so many girls from Jersey, New York, Connecticut that go to big time schools. It made me expand my recruiting base. So like, my freshman class this year, I've girl from Maryland, a girl from Maine, a girl from Vermont. Next year we have a girl from Wilmington, Delaware coming in. I have a girl from Orlando, Florida signed. We were in on a girl in Colorado, and it was us and the University of San Francisco, and they ended up going there. But it was more school related than it was team. She's like, trust me, it had nothing to do with you, the team, because But the fact is, if you don't take those shots to go after those kids,
Absolutely.
you're just not going to know. And one of the big things we talked about this year was trying to expand and diversify our teams, with athletic directors. So I actually, when everybody was at Bowdoin Park, that Saturday after Thanksgiving, watching the regional meets, I was down in Charlotte, North Carolina, watching the Foot Locker South regional race.
There you go.
And taking down names from all these kids from Kentucky and Texas and Arkansas and Alabama and Florida and Virginia and the Carolinas, and sending letters to them saying, hey, I was at that race. I thought you ran really tough. And I got to see, and one thing I told Pete, like we were talking, he's checking in, I said, Pete, there are a lot of fast kids in the South. There are a ton of fast guys and girls in the South.
Yeah.
Do you ever wonder if possibly maybe the weather in the Northeast could be a deterrent to getting those people from the South?
I think it can be. Sometimes I think it definitely is, because, for example, like Paige, who's coming to run for us next year, like they don't run indoor track because she lives in Orlando, Florida.
They do year-round training outdoor, and they run outdoor only. Yeah,
year-round training outdoors. They start their outdoor track season in February. Although this year they just announced that outside Tampa they're going to build the first indoor track in Florida for high school. But those kids train year-round. Same thing with the kids in Texas. Like they're training year-round, just banging on the track.
Their only indoor meet is nationals. That's their only indoor meet.
Even the West Coast, California, Stanford doesn't run inside. They train outside. They fly to indoor meets, but they're training outside year-round. Yeah. So I think some of those southern schools, those kids, they tend to stay on the South because the unknown of running up north where it's in the snow. But some of those kids will come up because a full ride's a full ride, and they're not going to turn it down.
Right.
Especially a good institution like Marist. Yeah.
How important do you think it is when you are doing the whole recruiting process to build a network with different coaches in different states, that maybe you've had one of their athletes in the past, and maybe they can connect you with other coaches from their area?
I think it's definitely important. I mean, I've done that a lot with a lot of schools in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, etc. When you get a kid from a certain program who does really well, you tend to get the really good kids in those programs start looking there. And that's why, like when I was down there at the meet, I just kept going up and introducing myself to all these Southern coaches, giving them my card, because I remember talking to a coach who was actually a father too. His daughter runs for him, and his top two girls both made Foot Locker, and his daughter was like a third girl, and she wasn't that bad. And he told me, he's like, yeah, we were looking at schools, like we didn't know where she could go, and so she's going to D2 school. And I looked at him and I said, what'd she run? And he tells me her PRs. He said, she could run for me, and she would have got money too. So here's my card in the future. So just making that connection. He's like, if I have good kids, he's like, I'll send them their way, because New York's not that far from Virginia. Yeah. And then I met, oddly enough, I met a nice set of grandparents who were watching my book bag is hanging on the fence, and they're like, who are you here to watch? Oh, our grandson. Oh, what's your grandson do? Oh, he was the state champ in Virginia. He's a junior. Would you be interested? I looked up his times and I'm like, yep, here's my card. Coach P will be in contact with you immediately. Because the kid won like Virginia in like 15-18, as a junior.
Yeah, the speed of kids, we didn't get to touch on that. Chuck, I definitely want to have you back on again, because we didn't even get to touch on the incredible speed of high school athletes. If we did that, we'd be going on to a 2-hour podcast. And unfortunately, we're not Joe Rogan. I don't think everyone has the attention span to stay on with us that much. I do want to ask you one last thing before we go. It's a question Dave and I have asked a lot of our guests, and I want to get your perspective, because you're a coach in the sport. You have high-level athletes, but you're also a fan of track and field. You pay attention. Yeah. You like the sport. Me and Dave are nerds for it. I've texted you about meets and things like that. What can we do in track and field to make it more popular? Unless you're in track, unless you ran track, and even mostly at a high level, because even if you ran track at a lower level, I ran in high school, I don't care. what can we do to make it, more appealing to the common fan? Because Dave pays for Peacock, so he can get the Diamond League meets on the international
world feed. I'm not watching on
because it's
NBC.
great.
No.
NBC sucks.
You
It's
need the
terrible.
world feed.
So what is your idea to get? Do you have any ideas in order to get us bigger, to understand and people to like the sport, like they like basketball, like they like football, like they like, Kadivus Robinson had a great idea on our other episode with creating teams similar to Tracktown USA. He had a good rundown. I want to hear what if you had control of, hey, Chuck Williams, make give me a program. How do we make the sport popular?
Yeah, I think the one thing that really helped the sport this summer was hosting the World Championships in Oregon.
Yep.
Because for those couple of weeks, we were the center of the track and field universe. I think we had more casual fans that either watched or attended than we've ever had. I know the experiences from all the foreign athletes who came, they had nothing but wonderful things to say about, listen, when you're in Oregon, it's Tracktown USA. They know track. Those are smart fans. They know about the sport and they appreciate it. But that's one small segment of the country, and in the U.S., I mean, we dominated. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, especially our sprinters. The way our sprint crews showed up and just basically took the world and said, not in our house, it just really opened a lot of eyes. And even, then you get, Sidney McLaughlin, who may be the greatest athlete in the world right now.
Oh yeah.
And she's going out.
Lyles,
people, no Lyles who
personality is it's infectious. Like he should be able to promote something as much as any other athlete. He's charismatic.
I love it. I love it. When NoJo goes live on Instagram, I always tune in to see what's going on.
Oh yeah.
Like,
and you mentioned people like Noah and Sydney. Sydney is a gorgeous woman on top of being a great athlete. Usually in America, the looks plus the talent, boom. But they're not there though, Chuck. That's the thing. Why isn't Sydney at the forefront? Why isn't Noah at the forefront? Why isn't Michael Norman at the forefront? All these people who have been dominant and are the class of the world right now.
It's because right now the U.S. they do not invest the money in the sport. They don't pay these professional athletes enough. They need more marketing opportunities. You talk to people, and I talk to people all the time, and we had, one of Cuesta's former teammates, Adam Vest, who ran sub-professionally. He was part of the original Run Flagstaff Elite team out there. Being a pro runner, it's not glamorous. You're not making it. You're not getting a huge salary. Mm-hmm. You're trying to work a part-time job to supplement while you're trying to train to be a world-class athlete.
Yeah.
And it's just not hard unless you're one of those, stars. But even that, there's very few Abby Steiners who are going to sign a multi-million-dollar deal or Sidney McLaughlin.
Right.
The problem is you need to market these athletes to draw in the casual fans, because a lot of them do have tremendous personality.
Yeah.
I mean, Noah Lyles could probably sell anything to anyone, and that when those guys finished up and he ripped that jersey, the pure joy he had.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. And then you got Arian Knighton, the teenage phenom, listen, those two are going to go back and forth for I don't know how many years. And, it was great because, I was at USA's, which was essentially the qualifying for Worlds. Everybody's talking about, the torch is being passed and Noah Lyles is going to get blown by this teenage kid. And it just lit a fire in him like no other. And he basically said, I'm the king. You're going to have to come take my crown.
But that's great. That's what other sports have. They have rivalries, and you don't have to hate each other, but they have people doing the same thing you see in other sports all the time. And also, Alex and I've said, which would obviously cost money, besides Oregon and maybe one or two other places, if you don't run in a college stadium, there's no track. There's no track only facilities where you can have these things. And
we need to build
over to Europe. And that's why track is so popular there, because all the big talent and all the big meets are overseas.
Or in the Diamond League, yeah. The U.S. needs to step up, and they need to create a league that, at first it's not going to be like the Diamond League, but you want to attract the best talent in the world to come to the United States and run, then you got to create a professional league. You got to build.
You got to pay.
You got to pay. You got to build a great stadium. And again, I think you need to build another stadium besides Oregon. Oregon's great, but it's also a college stadium.
Yep.
You need to build a stadium that is for a league, a professional league of track and field. And Alex, you talk about something Kadiva said, set up meets where it's like Team Nike versus Team Puma versus Team New Balance.
There's regional, like
so
Northeast
many more
versus,
right. The South. I mean, you got North, South, East, West. Team them up and just let them roll. And it's great because you're getting some shoe companies that are really trying to step up their game and really invest. New Balance. Puma's throwing out a bunch of money now too. Brooks, it's not Brooks. It's not just Phil Knight and Nike.
Yeah.
There's been so many things that have happened, with different Nike associated groups that kind of tainted it, because they were the monopoly of our sport for so many years, they were able to treat people a certain way. It was kind of like take it or leave it. Now you get other companies stepping up, and people are like, I don't need to be with Nike. I can be with somebody else. I mean, look at Adidas. You got Noah Lyles and Arian Knight. They're running for Adidas. They're not running for Nike.
Yep.
So I think
Sydney's running for New Balance.
New Balance, yeah. So as a sport, we have to invest more. We got to promote these athletes. We got to get them better endorsement deals. But as a sport, we need to create a professional league where there's big prize money. And guess what? You're going to draw those talents from across the way, like a Diamond League type of event. We're going to get the best runners, jumpers, throwers in the world that want to come to the United States and compete here.
I think pay is big because, Sydney was unbelievable this year, but I think she ran 4 meets.
Yeah.
So you have to not only get the meets here, but get these athletes to compete, not just worlds and things like that. So that the fan base knows if I'm paying to go to this meet, I'm going to see this athlete run.
Right. It's almost like they need to set up an annual contract system. Like, here's your annual salary. You're going to run 8 to 10 meets. You're going to show up to every meet. You're not going to pull a LeBron and sit out and have fans pay good money and not show.
Kadiva's flat out said if you tell these athletes that have $1 million deals that they would get consistently $80,000 a year to run 8 meets in the States, they would all take it. Right. Be home with their families, do it here, grow the sport. Yep. They would all take it. My model is golf. They have an umbrella. Right now, PGA is fighting with the LIV. I get it. But they have an umbrella. This is the umbrella. You all come here. You qualify for our event, and you compete in this event, and the prize money is everyone gets paid at the event. And whatever cuts you make, if you make the final cut, you obviously make more. And I feel like track could do a similar thing. Here's the umbrella. If you make finals, this is your rate for finals, and then finish it here.
Right.
If you qualify for the meet alone, you're going to get paid just for being there and competing. And yeah, it's not great if you don't make finals, but come to the next one, and consistently come and have a few contracted athletes that are guaranteed to be there and be marketed. And it doesn't have to be Sydney. It doesn't have to be a thing. There is an incredible amount of collegiate talent that once they go post-college aren't United States or the United States alternates that are still extremely fast. So
correct.
There's so much to do.
Then you build in incentives. Like if you break a stadium record, you break a national record, you break a world record, this is your bonus. I mean, it's gonna. That's how you draw the fans in. Is like you have to make track and field a marketable, exciting sport, and it can't be. Well, let's wait every 4 years for the Olympics or every other couple of years for the World Championships. I mean, this year was great. I think it helped.
Yes,
but really, how much did it move the needle?
None.
We're not going to know because as soon as they're done, they all are over in Europe running the rest of the season in the Diamond League.
Yep. I think that with some of these tweaks that we talked about, that the American Track League could be the start of something like that. Because just like Kadiva said, those meets were fun. They had barbecues. There was a lot of fan involved. Like you have to make it an event.
But they got to stop using high schools.
Well, yes, that's the issue.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
But like, where are they going to go? Like, I mean, you have Isham Stadium in New York, which is great, but is that big enough to hold one of these?
There's nowhere to park in. You wouldn't be able to get an event there.
It's all mass transit.
They're not flocking to Randall's Island.
Right. So I mean, like that. I would love to just see a track only place here. Kind of like the MLS did it, where they built smaller arenas that were made specifically for the sport of soccer, rather than having them in football stadiums.
Get 10,000 fans. Get small little arenas with tracks. Fill those first. I guarantee it'll work.
Absolutely.
And then you'll get the best professional track coaches in the country that will buy into it. Here's the other thing. I mean, you look at so many all-time greats. Like you're telling me you don't start a track league and you have whatever, north, south, east, west teams, and you take someone like Allison Felix and put her as a coach of the Western team.
Carl Lewis.
With Carl Lewis, I mean, he'd have to give up his Houston gig, but he probably would.
Andrew Valman over in Maryland would definitely go. He's coached the United States team before.
But then, listen, Jerry's coaching Oregon and he's coaching Bowerman, so he's still doing both.
Yeah.
Don't know how it's getting done. And here's the thing that kills me is we see now in college sports with NLI that high school athletes and college football players are getting $1 million deals.
Yep.
And you don't even know if they're going to make it to the NFL. And now you're going to see, there's a lot of whispers and rumors like, how is Schumacher going to bring Oregon back to its glory days? And people are saying, well, he's going to give a bunch. Hey, listen, he's going to give a bunch of NIL deals to a bunch of Kenyans. They're going to come over and they're going to crush everybody.
Yep.
I loved how Caitlin Tui signed. I thought that was great. Like that maybe that's the start of these companies saying, hey, not just basketball, not just football. Let's get these other athletes in the other sports because she's a star. She's a great runner, and and she could still compete at her school, but she gets
she gets some money.
That's great.
But all right, there's so many solutions. There's so many things we can go. Unfortunately, I do have to close this out, gentlemen, because again, we're going into Joe Rogan length, and we're not there. We're not there, guys. But Chuck, we're going to have you on again. We need to continue. We need to talk more about the high school development. We need to get into more. I know you're willing, so we'll be in touch soon.
Absolutely.
So again, he's Chuck Williams, head women's cross country and track and field coach over at my alma mater, Marist College. He's been there for 2 decades plus, 23 years. He doesn't seem like he's slowing down anytime soon. We're going to be able to have him on this show a decade later, and he'll be like, I'm 33 years in, and we'll be able to rehash the same stories. But Chuck, thank you so much for coming on. Anything that you would like to promote? I know you're pretty active on social media for Marist XC and things like that.
No, I just want to say thank you guys. This is a great platform that you guys have done, Talking Ovals, because you're exposing more people to the sport and they're listening to it. We're excited about this upcoming indoor season. All I'm going to say is keep an eye on a lot of the record boards and a lot of championships because the Foxes are going to be flying during the indoor season. And hopefully we'll have someone at an NCAA championship.
Hell yeah.
Let's leave it at that.
Dave, anything you want to say before we close on out?
I just want to thank Chuck for coming on, and definitely giving me a huge lesson in race walking. I mean, I know that was like 45 minutes ago, but that was just obviously it's something that we all know is there, but there's a lot of us who are not well versed in it at all. And, just for putting out that, that's certainly, it's a viable option. If you're in the Northeast, it's something that you want to get involved in. There are colleges that have programs out there that will help you. And thank you very much, because I did not know much about it at all. So I appreciate that lesson, and just, best of luck. And it was wonderful having you on.
All right. Thanks, guys. This was great. Have a good evening.
Yeah, again, thanks, Chuck. Again, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars, Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Go on Talking Nobles. Chuck, we'll talk soon. Keep sending us those PRs as it comes on. We're going to be hounding you.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone, have a good one. So long.